So thank you so much for coming out to talk a little bit about one of my favorite topics, which is mentoring, and how we can motivate our teams through mentoring, and how we can actually motivate people to stay with us, grow with us, and make sure that we have really great teams. And so I do have an amazing panel. I want to thank Amplitude as well. I want to thank Strikedeck, our Customer Success Leadership Network, and then of course all of you for coming and engaging in this topic, because I think it's a really important one. So before introductions, I do like to get to know the room a little bit for both myself, but also our panel members. So I first like to start with company size. So how many people work for companies that are 10 million and under in terms of revenue? Okay, good mix. What about 25 million and under? A few more, okay. 50 million and under? Okay, great. And then what about 100 million and under? One. And then what about 100 million plus? Okay, there's a couple in here. So we have a good mix of crowd in terms of people and like the revenue and the companies that they're working for, which is awesome, because that brings a lot of diversity and thought in this. I'm also interested in the people in the room. So how many people in the room are a practitioner? Like you're a CSM or you're part of a customer success team? Excellent, okay. What about CS leadership? So you're director, manager, VP. Excellent. What about people who are in like the consulting background? Anyone in the consultant side? Okay. And then what about people from other areas like sales, marketing? Any other teams here? Yes. I love it. Okay, great. I always think like we have a pretty good diverse mix of people. I love it. All right, one last thing. Yeah, everybody warmed up. And I guess for some people, how many people today might be looking for jobs? Anyone? Okay. Now, how many people in this room have jobs available? You need to network. So part of the purpose of this is to make sure we connect people together, and that's one way we do it. So again, thank you so much for coming. We're going to be talking about motivating through mentoring, and we are going to be talking about 3 different themes. The first one is, what is mentorship, and why does it matter? And then the second piece is, how do you build mentorship into your teams and into your companies? And then the third is going to be, what does it mean to be a mentor, a good mentor, or a good mentee? And how do you get mentors? And it's a pretty interesting topic because I know it's hard to get mentorship in Silicon Valley with everyone being so busy. So, with that, I'm going to let our speakers introduce themselves. And I realize I probably didn't do a very good job of introducing myself, but my name is Lauren Costella. I'm Vice President of Customer Success for a company called Good Time, which is a recruitment and candidate experience platform. And I've been a CS evangelist since I moved out to California, for almost a decade now, and it's like the best thing. So I love it. That's why I'm involved in all of these different meetups, and so I'm really excited to be here. So why don't I let all of you introduce yourself? Maybe say your name, your title, and the company you work for.
Okay. I'm MacLennan. I'm the Senior Vice President of Engineering and Product at an information security technology company called Barracuda down in the South Bay.
My name's Emilia, and I'm a partner at Winning by Design. We specialize in marketing, sales, and customer success. We're consultants. We go into companies. We help them build their teams and programs to scale.
And I'm Arjun Devgan, VP Customer Success at Amplitude. I already introduced Amplitude to you all, but you'll probably see it on the wall somewhere. We help companies build better products. It's important to know.
And I'm a customer.
Well, it's really fantastic. We have a powerhouse panel here to be able to talk about such a cool subject. And so, with that, I think we should get started. But I talked with Don. I talked with everybody beforehand, but Don had a really great idea. And why don't we open with everybody tell me a story about how you were mentored or how you have mentored people. So being the mentee or mentoring, I'd love to hear a story from you to just open this up. So Don, do you want to start?
Well, I think mentorship is for life, because I'm well into my 50s, so a little on the senior side in terms of the room. And I'm a 75-year-old mentor. And it's kind of a funny story, because when I first met him, I had no idea that our relationship would ever become that. When I met him, I was living in Prague, in Europe, and I was head of product management for a software company. And we maintain a network of advisors back here in Silicon Valley, just to try to stay connected with leading edge tech. And so around 2010, I got really interested in big data as a way to start collecting product telemetry, make sense of it, drive better products. This was before companies like Amplitude existed. And there was a guy named Wayne, who was one of our retained advisors here in the Valley. And I tried to organize a visit to the Valley to start talking to people who had familiarity with big data technology at the time. So I was going to take my executive team, and we were going to go on a roadshow here in the Valley. So I called up Wayne, I got introduced to him, and started saying, hey, can you help introduce us to software vendors, to practitioners, just anybody who's familiar with, at the time would have been called Hadoop. And he was really demanding. He's like, I need you to write up all the reasons why you want to meet these people that I'll introduce you to. And other people that were helping facilitate this trip here in the Valley were like, yeah, sure, dude, we'll help you. Who do you want to talk to? And Wayne was kind of the hard ass. And so I went to my colleague who made an introduction, like, who is this guy? So that was the start of our relationship. In 2012, I came to the Valley, I left my job in Prague, and I had no idea what I was going to do. I ultimately founded a startup. And he began to mentor me as it relates to raising money from venture capitalists, which I did at the end of 2012. Over the period where my startup was viable, he was very helpful with each successive round of financing and just dealing with all the inherent challenges. But that wasn't the end of the story, because it's now kind of reached the level of an incredibly intense, intimate friendship. I was just out to visit him. He's moved to Las Vegas. We went hiking in the mountains for a day, and we talked for 6 hours without breathing, about our life stories and our personal challenges and our work challenges, because we're the same person. And so my point is, these mentorship relationships can become incredibly deep and rewarding over time, and you're kind of never done.
I love it. I love it. Emilia, do you have a story to share as well?
I would love to. I have several, but I'll pare it down to one. When I was going to university at the University of British Columbia, I was dating a boy, and his mother was an entrepreneur, as she is, and she invited me to go to a conference in Vancouver for women, and all the women, or it was all women-led conference. And what I learned through that experience of attending this conference changed, I feel, my life. The woman's no longer alive now, the founder of the Body Shop, but she spoke at the event. And having my boyfriend's mom take me to this event, and then even though we're not together, fast forward 20 plus years, she continues to write me. I still reach out to her for advice. She's an entrepreneur. And as an immigrant from Italy, with my father having grade 3 education, and my mother, who was studying to be a nun, wasn't exactly excited about me being in university. So to have a woman like this see that I was interested in pursuing an education and a career was life-changing for me. So for me, that woman, while she may not even know she was a mentor in my life, I feel had a significant impact to the point where it led me to where I am today.
Thank you for sharing. Lauren.
Wow, so I would say my mentorship story has connections to both of yours. So my mentor was an immigrant from Trinidad and Tobago to Canada. He lives in Canada. I worked for him for 7 years, incredible manager. And he was a bit of a hard ass, which is why I would sort of compare him to Don's story, because my first, I would say, moment of truth with him was I was as an individual contributor at NetSuite, and I was driving up. He was visiting San Francisco. I was driving up to the city, and he said, "Hey, would you ever live anywhere else?" And I said, "What a strange question." And I said, "No, I'm single. I live in San Francisco. Why would I live anywhere else? It's the best place to live." And he didn't say anything, and that was the end of the conversation. And it took me a long time to realize he just had that one sentence with me, but then he pinged me again a month later, and he says, "Hey, what are you going to do after you do your current job?" And he would just ask me these one things, and what it was leading up to was he finally said, I think you should move to Denver and open our Denver office. And he sort of built that up. And I completely shot down the idea. I said, it's a ridiculous idea. I would never leave San Francisco, push back. And I would say he pretty much forced me to move to Denver. And it's kind of shocking because you're like, how can anyone force you? Just to make matters worse, I was getting married at the time, and like to inform my about-to-be wife that we were moving to another city was a whole other challenge, but we'll save that for another day. But long story short, he sold me on the idea that it was very important to get out of your comfort zone and go to a new place, to a new city. And what that ended up doing was I moved into my first ever manager job by moving to Denver, and we ended up building a 300-person sales and services office for NetSuite. I signed a 12 to 18-month agreement with NetSuite to move there. I ended up staying there 5 years because it just turned out to be such an incredible opportunity. And what I learned from that, which we'll talk about probably later on, is that sometimes you may not agree with what someone's trying to say to you, but like it's really important to understand where they're coming from. He was doing it for me, not for the company, and that was a really amazing sort of lesson for me. And he's, I had a call with him on Tuesday. He's still my mentor. So.
Wow, what a story! Thank you. And I mean, I think it's pretty clear. There's this theme in mentorship of people having really big impact, especially on the receiving side. And also this pushing outside of your comfort zone, which I think is really incredible. And that those relationships typically, even though it's uncomfortable, tend to last a really long time. And so I'm actually interested, and I think this is a really great time to talk about what is mentorship and what is it not. And I know that when I talk to people beforehand, again, Don, I point to you because I know that we had talked a little bit about mentorship, and you were really specific to say that you didn't think that mentors could be necessarily your manager. And I really want to dig into that and understand what you mean by that.
Yeah, I think a mentorship is really predicated on a level of trust and disclosure and vulnerability that you just can't achieve with your boss, or shouldn't achieve with your boss. The dynamic is different. So some bosses can be tremendous coaches, right? And at the time you're working for them, they can give you tremendous feedback and help you grow. But you're going to withhold information from your boss because of the dynamic of them being in a position of authority. It's just human nature. So I think a mentor, by definition, can't be that individual, as valuable as a great boss can be to you. It's got to be somebody else. I'll generally advise people to work with mentors that are not inside even the company they work for. Even when it's a large company, like in the recent past, I was involved in a formal mentorship program for females in a company called McAfee. And so I was mentoring an individual who was in an adjacent department, but like all of these things, she begins to share stories about work and asking me for my understanding of it. Well, I had knowledge of her boss and the work she did, in which case it kind of distorted a little bit, because there's things I maybe couldn't have said to her that I knew about, even about her leadership team, right? Diminished value of the role I could play, which is not to say I wasn't helpful, but the best mentor is somebody with whom you can be completely transparent, who has a degree of objectivity. They're not caught up in the day-to-day relationships that you're engaging at work.
Emilia, what do you think of that?
Yeah, I have mixed feelings, and I think I completely respect and understand and agree you have to withhold some information when you're in your role. I think when you're going into a startup, like I did with WalkMe, and we were all really new, the company was new, different culture, different views of what does success look like. It was hard. I mean, I would say, let's do a walk and talk while I was in Tel Aviv, and suddenly they're like, oh no, am I in trouble? And no, it's like, I want to help you get to the next level of your career, and I want to have a candid conversation. Let's take this offline. And it is hard, but sometimes I feel like you have to do that, even if you're in a leadership role. I will say, if you're willing to be vulnerable in that way, and I'm not saying you have to disclose everything, but be able to give strong hints to someone to better their career or where the direction they're heading, I think you can have a significant impact without saying a lot. And that can be as simple as, let's go outside of the office and just have a candid conversation.
I would say every manager should aspire to be a mentor, and every employee should find a mentor outside of their manager.
I think that was well said.
Short and sweet.
Makes sense.
Very much so. I think it's, like when I think about that, I do think there's an element of vulnerability that you have to bring to team. And I think this probably comes from my own sports background, but you have to be willing to actually tell people exactly how it is. Many of you probably read that book, Radical Candor, or maybe Patrick Lencioni's 5 Dysfunctions of a Team. Trust is at the center of all of that. And so I do think in management it is really important to have a level of vulnerability and candor with people that you're working with, which can turn into mentorship later. Even if you start as a coach, I do think it can turn into that. Because I've certainly had bosses in various positions, and then they're now definitely strong mentors in life. But I think these are really, really great points, which actually leads me to, how do you push CSMs or teams? Like, where do you have to mentor? Do you find that you've had to do that with teams and push, maybe some information or help them grow in a way that maybe is uncomfortable? Or have you? So I'm going to start down at the end this time because I don't want to start with the same people.
I think it's a bit of a layup question for CS because, as most of the folks here have had some role in CS. CS means so many different things in different companies, and usually it evolves every 6 to 12 months. So as the business changes, the needs of, the classic example is early stage companies, the CSMs often have 4, 5, 6 different things they're doing. And over time, you start to specialize roles, and it's a big fundamental change you go through. And I think all of those create sort of growth opportunities because you have to evolve, you have to constantly reinvent yourself, you have to adapt to change. So I think that it creates room for mentoring and helping understand how sort of the next stage of the evolution is going to help you develop your certain skills, right? Or develop new skills, or actually double down on skills you already have and make them even better. So that's kind of, I would say is where there's an opportunity to introduce mentoring programs, formal and informal, in a CS team.
Emilia or Don, any comments?
I just think anything like mentoring, I agree with getting out of your comfort zone. Isn't that what everyone's seeking? Right? If you're not constantly seeking to grow, then it's questionable even in your job. What are you doing? You're comfortable and you're doing the same thing over and over again. That's when you really need a mentor. Everyone thinks that, I need to get to the next level, the next title. Why? What are you good at? What makes you excited to wake up about in the morning? That's what you should be striving to achieve. And I agree, talking to your boss may not be the best way, but seeking new opportunities and new things that may get you really excited, because it might not be what you even studied in university, for example. It might be something different, and that's when a mentor really comes into play.
I think there's an interesting paradigm in customer success, which is on the one hand, the role is really interconnected. How do you not talk to your sales counterparts? How do you not talk to your product counterparts? How do you not talk to your support counterparts? That's just inside the company. You've got all these complex inter-team relationships, and then depending on the nature of product you sell to a customer, you've got more than one constituent on the customer side of the relationship as well. So they're very complex dynamics as it relates to interpersonal relationships. And by the same token, most customer success teams at the individual contributor level are comprised of people who are relatively early in their career. It's changing, but man, talk about being unequipped to be thrown into such a complex environment. So I think it really is super important to have mentorship as an ingredient to your growth, because you're being challenged in a way that some people are never going to experience in their entire career, because the role they play doesn't have these attributes.
It is really interesting because I absolutely agree with you, and I'm so interested in, we didn't actually talk about this, but the style of mentorship that works for you. I'm really curious because, for me, over time, whether it's coaching or having different bosses, sometimes you need the tough love, sometimes you need the easier stuff. And I know that, we talked about 2 different mentors, for example, that seemed maybe a little bit harsher or tougher. I'd love to dig into that a little bit more. I've certainly had various people in time be really blunt, and it's hard to hear. The sting is hard. But at the same time, I almost respect it, because we're not talking around something, we're talking exactly what is the problem. And a really good example for that, for me, was working, I worked at the Pentagon for a little bit, and I worked in strategic communications and had no idea what that was. And my mentor, and still mentor, Janine Moss, took a look at some of the work that I produced, and she said, "This is crap." And that's hard to hear when you are thinking that you're doing okay, and you're like, "Well, I'm doing the best I can, I don't even know what I'm doing." But the great news was, she's like, "Yeah, this is crap, but I'm gonna help you, I'm gonna grow you, I'm gonna make this, I'm gonna help you be better." And she's still my mentor today. She's totally gone off into a totally different avenue. But it's really cool to have someone who will be that straightforward with you. And so I'm curious about the style of mentorship that you find works. Do you have more than one mentor that you go to for different things? I'm really curious to hear. And maybe Emilia, we start with you.
So I'm that kind of mentor. I'm Italian, I'm pretty candid. But I'm also very sensitive. There's someone in this room who I've reported to, and I was so scared going into my review, just like, oh, I don't know what to expect. Even the person who reported above him, not the person in the room, but the person I reported to, forced me, right before I was going on stage, to have my yearly review with him. And it was a terrible feeling. And I called one of my mentors right afterwards to calm me down, even though it was a fairly positive review. But I will say that having people be candid with you are the people you grow the most from. And it doesn't have to be negative, but it's how you anticipate that conversation, which makes it worse. And so having those candid conversations and being able to have them is really powerful. I've had conversations with people that I've mentored where they started crying, and it was terrible. It was terrible, and I didn't mean for that, but like me, I'm super emotional. You put any sort of movie in front of me, I'm crying. It's not even sad. So there are different emotions, and you have to be able to pick up on that emotional intelligence. I will say that those 2 women who cried, they're the women who went on to get their MBAs and asked me to write letters for them. And I'm super proud of that, because I thought, wow, I've done a horrible job of mentoring these women, but they're just super emotional like I am. Mm-hmm. I'll just leave it at that.
I'm not gonna have you mentor me.
I'm
Not on my list of mentors, but I would say, so I learned something a few years ago, I don't know where this was, but it was the test for receptivity, right? Which is, there's people, the trust piece, like you don't know where you are, or you may know where you stand with somebody. So even if you want to be direct, you have to see are they ready to receive that directness at this point in time or not. And that's really important. So I think it does depend on the situation. Are you having a conversation about a sensitive topic? It's like a tough performance sort of discussion. Is it more constructive feedback? Are you following up a really lavish compliment on something they did exceptionally well with one piece of minor feedback? So really, I think whether it's just a pure manager conversation or true mentoring, really the trust piece has to come first. And if I'm going to have a tough conversation, I would rarely have it if I see that the person is not receiving, or if I open my mouth and I know they're not receiving, I would change my tone. So that's super important. That's definitely something I use to adjust my approach in conversations when I can.
Yeah, I think I'll answer maybe from the perspective of a leader.
Yeah.
Because I'm often finding myself coaching individuals that work for me and mentoring people that used to work for me and mentoring people that neither was the case. I think as a manager, I like to think about a good manager as a carpenter. And they've got a tool belt. And good carpenters don't always use a hammer, because you're never going to build a house with just a hammer, right? So you need a nice tool belt, and you need to know when to pull the right tool out. And so sometimes one of my favorite things to do is walk and talks. literally just get out of the building. We're in nice sunny California here, so you can do that almost every month of the year. It really takes people into a different environment where they're not associating what you're saying with like, oh my God, the implication of being in an office and hearing this is terrible. Just one tool, right? 360s can be a great precursor to a coaching or mentorship relationship because you're starting to build awareness for the individual without telling them anything, right? They're taking that survey result and beginning to interpret what it means because they'll hear it from others, they'll see patterns. So that, it's about developing 3, 4, 5 tools and then understanding situationally how to apply them. You as a leader or a mentor can't be the same way in every situation. You need a little bit of versatility.
I really love that, and I think it actually starts to get at, how do you build mentorship into your teams? I love the idea of, you as a leader have a tool belt. How do you build mentorship into your team? What are the benefits of that? And then beyond that, how do you push that into your company? So I'd love to start first with Arjun. Maybe you can talk to me a little bit about, how do you build that within your team? And are there prerequisites for it?
Sure. So how you build that into your team, it's funny, when we talked about this before the meeting, I said, I have not worked at a lot of companies where it was formalized, but then I remembered an example that I actually shared with somebody right before. I worked at a small company, less than 75 people, and we decided that, I can't remember the exact reason for it, but it was a great idea. We ended up having cross-functional mentoring. And even at a company that size, I had a director of engineering that I was mentoring, and one of my sort of more technical services people went and got mentored by the VP of engineering, and it was eye-opening because I think what happens as a director of engineering is you just go to gravitate towards engineering people to be your mentors, and it just blows your mind when like someone in like a completely different, like a marketing person is mentoring you. So that's one of the things which is like, are we often looking for people in our own career stream? And are we getting too narrow a perspective from them? Just like you want to go outside your company, should we go get mentored by people who are not in our job function or not in technology at all? Because it will really open our mind. Like, if you ever worked with a founder of a company who actually had a background in something else, they have a very different viewpoint than a traditional sort of SaaS or technology person. So that was one piece. What was your second question?
I'm just curious, like, how do you build that, like, within your team?
Yeah. Well, actually, so you also asked a question about like prerequisites to be a mentor, which I think I'd rather answer that question. So I do think one important thing, and I think I'll give this advice to someone who's looking to be mentored, more so than someone who's trying to be a mentor, is I don't know if everyone is qualified to be a mentor. And I think there's a lot of people who are ready to give advice. And it's important that you select someone who is able to give you advice in an area they have expertise in. Because you might be looking for very specific advice, or very broad coaching. And if you're going to build a long-term relationship with them, they better be really good at that or have a lot of experience with that, because you could waste a lot of your sort of career spending time with somebody who perhaps was not an expert. So that's just important. I do think it's important to know whether someone is like fully ready to be your mentor. So choose carefully.
I think that's really wise. What about you, Emilia? How do you think about building mentorship into teams or into companies? Have you experienced that or seen that done well?
Yeah, so a slightly different take, but I believe we all are born with freebies, and what that means is we all have a gift, and we can all share it. So if you're on a team and you have limited budget, find out and get the team to elicit what are they good at, what can you share, and then use those freebies to help each other level up. So I'm a huge advocate of that. And it doesn't have to be something formalized like a mentorship program. I know companies like Twilio and the Confluence, all of those companies, they have great mentorship programs for people of color, women, LGBT. They're amazing, and not every company has the resources or the people willing to lead these type of mentorship programs. But if your company doesn't, I say why not find out what everyone's good at and let's have them do it. So at Copper, a company I'm working with right now in customer success, someone was really adamant about a customer success program that they had just learned about. And I said, why don't you help the whole team? Help them by mentoring all of them on any skill that they're feeling like they need help with. And I think that's really special. You don't need something formalized to kickstart something like a mentorship program.
I love it. Don?
I don't think you can make it mandatory. My observation of any enabling program for professional growth, be it mentorship, learning and development, you name it, there's always a bell curve. You'll see people who will never avail themselves of it because it's a job, not a career to them. Hopefully it's in the minority. You'll see people who take tremendous advantage of it on the other end of the bell curve, and then you'll see people that will pick and choose the tools that they want to consume.
Yeah.
And it won't always be mentorship. So I think you can create an enabling environment, you can expose people, you can encourage people, I don't think you can mandate it.
It's a really interesting point. I do think that you will always have people that will take advantage of those things and won't. But I love the idea of, figuring out what kind of skill sets people have and tapping into. If people like to teach, allowing them to do so, which might be different, that might turn into something more like mentorship. I think they're slightly different, teaching someone to do something well versus like mentoring, and helping someone like think more broadly about things. But I love both of those ideas to at least getting it started. I know we talked a little bit about, getting that into a company or trying to maybe make that case. But I'd like to talk a little bit more, and Arjun, you started talking about this, so I'll let others speak to it too, but I'd love to move into a little bit more about what it's like serving as a mentor and serving as a mentee. Like, what are some of the things, like, what is a good mentor? What's a good mentee? And how do we, go about finding them? So I want to start first with, what is a good mentor? Do you want to start? Do you want to start?
Oh, Don, you go.
All right, you go for it.
Mic is up.
What is a good mentor? That's I think it's a difficult question. I think I would say at the top of the list is making time. It's because the biggest problem with establishing a trusted mentor relationship is like, do you really have the time? Are you able to give the time to that person? So making time is really important. The second one really is like the definition of a mentor in my mind is something along the lines of, you're using your experience to accelerate their path to success, right? Because they're inexperienced in a certain area, and how can you impart some of that knowledge and be a sounding board and listen really well? So to me, between those two things is sort of the definition of a good mentor.
I'll just add being an active listener. And that means not jumping into your conclusion or what you're thinking, but rather asking, is there anything else you want to share? And I learned that from this amazing book called The Coaching Habit. I actually listened to the book, and then it was so profound for me, I bought the book. And I've given it away as gifts, but I believe that being a good mentor means listening and really understanding what do you really want that will give you a high impact career and life, so when you come home at the end of the day, you're an amazing friend, parent, sister, whatever it is you do when you leave work. Because so many people are so hung up on their careers, and they're doing things that don't even make them happy, and then guess what happens when they get home? They're terrible partners, they're unhappy, they're depressed, and that's what being a good mentor is helping people realize like what makes them really happy and how can they go after those dreams. And so that's what I think is really active listening, asking more and more questions before you even give any advice.
Love it. I love it. Colin.
I would say half the time that I'm involved in being a mentor, somebody's presenting me a conclusion they've already reached.
Interesting.
They're hoping for a little bit of validation or just trying to put voice to it. Right? But they've already made up their mind. It's like, and you're there to say, it's not crazy the way you're thinking. I think maybe another facet of that is, often people are trying to use mentors to confront very hard decisions or ugly truths or something that makes them uncomfortable, for which they just can't kind of get the courage to name it as an issue and address it actively. It's kind of analogous to therapy, I suppose, on a personal talk of an issue that someone is struggling with becomes the topic of conversation actively. And as I said, sometimes people have the solution in mind, and other times they don't because they have yet to bring it to the forefront and make it the basis of the mentorship conversation.
I think that's really interesting. I mean, I certainly use my siblings and go with conclusions, and I'm one of six, so I definitely go to the ones where I'm going to get my answer confirmed whenever I need it. So I definitely know which one.
I'm 1 of 7. I need to be better than you.
And not that they're necessarily mentors, but I do understand that. But I think it's really interesting, like when people come to you with like their own conclusions about something. Talk to me about what good mentors do. Do you just play off of that, or do you challenge them differently? Do you help them think differently? Do you just listen? I'm really curious. How do you approach that as a mentor?
I try to make sure that people have taken an inventory of all the choices. So even if they've made a choice, just to confirm they've thought about all the alternatives.
Yeah.
I tend to not recommend things specifically beyond just making sure that all the alternatives are on the table.
Interesting.
I'll just add, I always recommend bring 3 solutions or ways of how you're thinking about tackling the challenge, and which of the 3 would you recommend? And then, like I think you said, they already know the answer. They're looking for someone to confirm what they're thinking or poke holes in it.
So I agree with what you said. I think what I would add, since I don't want to repeat what you just said, is occasionally I've seen like, are they going to be able to recommend a solution? And if they can't, because there might be a gap, maybe give them a little more direction in terms of like point them in the right direction to go look for the solution. Go talk to these 3 people, or go look up this, or go, like a good example might be, I've now worked in multiple companies where the heads of support, having run large support organizations, always say, hey, go look at the benchmarks for support surveys and what are the common statistics that are used to sort of benchmark support, first reply time, CSAT, whatever that might be. So then they go do the research and come up with a set of recommendations. So if someone doesn't have the experience, just guiding them a little bit is really helpful.
And just building on that, I'll say, I think if you're looking at someone and you're having a conversation where you can read what they're thinking, they may be telling you something that they think you want to hear or they feel like will level up their career, but you can tell, is it really what they want to do? Is it really what will make them happy? And a good mentor will be able to identify that they're just saying that because they think they're supposed to.
Which is really interesting and kind of gets me to kind of the final part of our discussion here. But like, as a mentee, what are some good practices then? Like if you're mentoring me in this way and you're maybe trying to get me to think about something, like how should I act as a mentee? Or what do you think are good mentee practices?
You should move to Denver. I think, I mean, look, I was not good at taking recommendations from my mentors early in my career, and I still don't like taking recommendations. And I think that's the biggest improvement has been like understanding that you have to digest something and not react to it. So being less reactive. Self-awareness is a big part of it. Like there's nothing a mentor can help you with if you're convinced what they're saying is wrong, or if you're right. So like just understanding, like triangulation is a good strategy. If you really think something is wrong and like you're not lining up, go ask somebody else. Have multiple mentors to triangulate. So triangulation is a great strategy both for mentors and mentees in that sort of relationship. So I would add those as a couple of tactics you can use as a mentee to have a more effective relationship.
I would say show up prepared. You are asking someone to spend their time with you and invest in you. So show up prepared. Show up that you did your homework, what doubts you have and why, and how they can impact your career, your relationships. Just like when you're in customer success, you're trying to get that executive to that renewal or expansion conversation. You better have an agenda in that meeting invite, and if you're inviting your boss, of course you're going to prepare him or her, right? So you better prepare your mentor by being prepared with research, why you want to have this conversation, and being really high impact. So if you show up with preparation, you're going to be able to go way deeper than having to like start from scratch explaining everything you're going through.
That's really great advice. John?
So I had an experience a few months ago. I was on stage giving a presentation about something, I don't remember the topic, and at the end, an employee from the company, this was an internal meeting, came up to me and said, "Hey, I really liked what you had to say. Would you consider being my mentor?"
Yeah.
And it's like, I don't know, I mean, should we go on a first date in the Sahara right now? That's a little too fast, too soon. So I think mentorship is not a binary state, it's a continuum. It's a continuum of any relationship. And you'll reach it at a certain state. So be prepared to invest and be prepared to calibrate what you're asking that person to do as a byproduct of the stage of the relationship you're building. Because you can ask people for advice all day long. Some of them will be helpful in giving advice, but won't ever evolve to being a mentor. But it's the journey that you have to go on, right? So there is no formal yes/no answer to being a mentor. It tends to just organically occur with certain of your relationships, and others never get there, and that's fine. All those relationships have value. So I'd say pay attention to calibrating the state of the relationship and what you're asking of it, and not try to get too far beyond it because you're very hungry to have a mentor. Someone else made a point, like, it's really hard to find a mentor, right? It takes a lot of time and a lot of investment in that relationship, and maybe years before an individual becomes that person to you. I've had multiple former bosses that became mentors, but I mean, my gosh, it was over the course of a decade, until I could well and truly consider them to be that, and the state of our relationship reached that point. So it takes a little patience, a little persistence.
Can I add one thing? So just to Don's point, I think one of the most important things is, Don just said that it takes, 10 years to build that relationship. You weren't working for those people that entire 10 years. So like you maintained the relationship. And this is not advice, this is my personal experience. I have spent time in my career chasing people I thought were my ideal mentors, and they didn't really have time for me. And it's fine, you should go after somebody who you think might be like an expert who can actually like impart knowledge. But you need to know when to cut your losses, and actually where you need to focus your energy is not losing the connections you already have. I don't know if everyone does this consistently. Were there people in your past life, past company, maybe not a company, maybe your personal life, who actually had the potential to be your mentors, but you just disengaged with them because you moved on from that company? You don't have time, you're super busy, they live in another country or city, and it's just too difficult. Like, do you make the time and space to make room for a quarterly check-in call, holiday card, whatever that might be, to remain in their lives and keep them in your lives? Because you sure as hell can't call them just when you need help. So the nurturing of the relationship is super important, and I think the one thing I've learned is focus on the relationships you have and preserving them. One day when I move on from Amplitude 22 years from now, I certainly hope to keep the relationships.
I'll give you a little growth hack related to that. So I adopted a habit a few months ago. About 2 years ago, I got this email out of the blue from one of my best friends in my 20s. We were both living in Boston at the time. He moved to Dallas, I moved to Europe, and then to the Bay Area, and we hadn't talked in years. And I just got this email out of the blue, and he wrote me a story about some great weekend we had together skiing or something, and just said, "Hey, thank you for being my friend at the time." And I wrote a blog about this, but I was like, is he in some self-help or recovery program right now? Awkward, it just came out of the blue. And it took about 6 months to realize, like, wow, that made me feel really good. So I started writing these gratitude emails. And man, has it been fun. Because you don't have to use recent things you're thankful for. I mean, I literally wrote a letter to my first boss and thanked them for being a role model as it relates to hiring females. This was literally 1988. And I somehow tracked down his mailing address. I hadn't talked to him in 30 years. And I started emailing people that I probably hadn't seen for 5 years. And the reason I bring it up is it can rekindle a past relationship, right? You can start talking to people you've lost touch with. What better way than to thank them about something they did for you at the time, or just a note of appreciation for the relationship you had.
That's great, love that.
Yeah, me too. I feel like being in a state of gratitude and thanking people for the time they spend with you will pay back tenfold.
Yeah, I think it's, just from the theme here, it's really interesting because it's not necessarily about going out and finding a mentor, but it is about building relationships. which of course we do in CS all the time, but building relationships with people. And I think in some ways, like, it is really organic. It's not about going out and finding this person saying, I want you to be my mentor, because really, if you think about a relationship, like, what's in it for them? There might be something, but like just coming up and randomly saying that is a little bit, it's kind of like, well, I don't know, like maybe, like I don't even know if I can help you. And so I think it's really interesting that we kind of touched on this theme of being like in a position where you're looking for mentorship. It's really about relationships, and it's really about building those, and then actually through that building of relationships, you start to realize, like, yeah, who are the people that when you maintain this, you're equally getting something. And I just wanted to get one more thing before we open up for questions, but what do you get out of being mentored? What do you get out of your mentees? Like as a mentor, like what do you get out of it? One thing.
So I'm going to say something very strange. I think the reason all of us should mentor is because if you're struggling to find mentors, you can't do that to the next round of people. So in my mind, it's a very paid forward type of thing. I believe that if you make time and space for other people, people will make time for you. So that's why I do it.
I'll say the majority of mentors in my life have been men, and to me that's sad that I didn't have more women in my life that were either available or I could find. And so I said I want to change that course. I want to be the woman that mentors other women and men. I have men that I mentor as well. I want to have an impact the way these men have had on my life.
Great. And John?
It's really simple. It's why I lead. It's worth it.
That's great. So I just want to thank all of you for being here, but I do want to make sure that we get some questions from the audience about any of the topics here that we discussed. We talked a little bit about mentorship as it relates to companies, as it relates to being a good mentor and mentee, and then we talked at the beginning about what does mentorship mean. But does anyone have any questions they want to ask us?
I'm going to go first, and then I'll do the
Yeah.
microphone. And I see you over there. So my question to you guys is thank you, first of all.
Yeah,
Is this on?
I think so.
There, that's better.
There we go.
Thank you guys, first of all, and great panel. Let's have a round of applause. So Lauren asked you, what did you get out of mentoring, and that's great. What's the main thing you feel you've given in mentoring? Can you say one thing that, as a mentor, that you felt like you've given to somebody that's been really, really impactful?
I would say getting out of their comfort zone, being out of a safety zone, because my mentors have challenged me to do things that I never thought I was possible of doing.
Anyone else?
Similar, enabling growth. Somebody has an objective in terms of where they want to be in their career, helping them chart that journey, helping them achieve it.
I stole Arjun's microphone.
I mean, I have a great example from this week, and I think someone ran something by me that they were intending to do, and I was able to help shape the direction in which they wanted to take it, and today we closed the conversation and said, that went exceedingly well. So seeing someone achieve the desired outcome that they wanted to achieve, and sort of just guiding them along the way is what I hope to get out of it.
And I think some of my mentors, it's funny, they probably wouldn't even know what they gave me, but it's inspiration. Like I see them do stuff, and I'm like, I can do that too. Like even if they're not giving me the advice to get, like I can just see it. So it's just actually just general inspiration.
Hi, great position here. So my name is Matt Goodman, and thank you both, or all of you, for the presentation here. It was great. One quick comment on the Coaching Habit +1 on that book. Love that book. The what else trick is a great one to kind of drain the bucket. And I also love the notion of rekindling a past relationship with a mentor. And I was just thinking about this because I have someone who was a mentor to me, but I didn't recognize they were a mentor at the time. And but now, like in hindsight, like a lot of the things that this individual taught me are really impactful in my career. One of the things that he would say to me is our job as leaders is to give direction and not directions. And he always had these little witticisms, and that was one of them. And so along that lines, of not kind of giving the mentee the answer, but helping them find it on their own. Can you share an experience where either you as the mentor helped someone, even if you know the answer, but you kind of help them get there on their own, or on the receiving end of that, where someone helped you get to an answer, or maybe you didn't think you were going to get to?
Amelia, you want to start?
I just started this book, but I'll just read you the title, but I believe this really sums it up by Ben Horowitz. What you do is who you are.
Yep.
You've read it, maybe? Or, yeah.
It's a great book.
And you know what? The title is just so powerful. You create a business culture by your actions. And so how you show up at work, your attitude, everything you do impacts everyone around you. And I think that's like what you're trying to say or asking. I would say everything you do influences the people around you. You don't even have to give direction. It's how you react to someone asking you a question. You've already told them within the first 5 seconds how you're thinking. So I don't know if that answers, but it's a beginning.
Oh, I just have a quick comment. So the question was like, how do you do more mentorship? And one of my favorite frameworks that I learned from a mentor is it's called FLIP. And let me just explain that because it's a great hack for mentorship. As mentors, we are in the knowledge economy and the innovation economy, and that's what's most valued. But as mentors, many times mentees come to you with ideas, and let's face it, out of 10 ideas, maybe 2 are good, 1 is stellar, and the rest of them are less usable. But you don't want to turn them away because the next time they're not going to bring ideas to you, right? So the model is called FLIP. And so the flip is F is basically your favorite thing. So basically share with them, here are my favorite things about your idea. And L is least favorites, which is, these are things that I did not like or they don't make sense. And I is insights. This is where you bring your industry insights and market insights. And P is a way for you to restate the problem. What problem are you trying to solve? And that's just a framework to use as mentors when mentees bring you ideas.
Thank you. That's really great. Flip.
Get over to our next question is?
Pass the mic.
I think that one of the things as mentors is that classically you are leaders. And I'm curious if you find that people who choose to reach out to you as mentees are seeking to follow that path as a leader, or if you feel that is more broadly applied. I think that might have been more broadly applied for you.
It's a really interesting question.
So fascinating question. I would say my reaction to that is, it is possible that people who are more driven and sort of desirous of leadership roles are more likely to make the effort to seek out mentors and do things outside of their regular jobs. Don talked about the curve, which is there's people who go out of their way to learn, and there's people who, it's just a job, unfortunately. So there could be a correlation potentially where like the hungriest people who want to grow the most, learn the most. So I don't know if it's about leadership, but certainly the people who want to grow the most would seek out and put in the extra effort to develop a mentor-mentee relationship.
I think it's pretty correlated.
And I'll just add, because I am coaching someone in this position in Brazil right now. He feels like he doesn't have any other way to go, but in this role that he thinks he needs to go into leadership of customer success, but he's really data-driven. He's really interested in growth. They don't have that title at his company. So I said, why don't you propose it Build your own job description. How amazing would that be? Your company needs a growth role. And if it's not there and they don't accept it, go find a company who needs a growth leader. I said if I could hire you, I would. Because at Copper, we have a growth leader and we work together really well so that he's able to ensure that what we're doing is actually working, a lot of A/B testing. So a lot of the time, they may think they're coming to you because they want to be like you, but that's not really what gets them excited. It's just they may not have explored what roles are out there that they might be really good at.
And I also think there's a distinction between wanting to be mentored to move up or just hone a skill. So I don't have to move up, but I'm it's growth in a different way. I can be an expert or a super expert at something without ever taking on management or leadership but really hone that skill. And I think there are mentors in my life that have definitely helped me with that, just a skill or something that doesn't have to do with leading people or leading teams or anything like that. So, but a really interesting question.
So two more, we got one here and one over there.
Great.
So there are people who are managers, and we were talking about how people actually ask for a mentor, hey, do you want to be my mentor? Or they're looking for someone that will help them grow in their careers, even though they do not know how to grow. And sometimes the managers, they really need to align expectations and help them digest some things, or really listen and try to be less reactive about getting feedback or even starting a mentorship. So how do you deal with people in your team that are looking for a mentor, but they are really having difficulties to really listening, and if they really need or want a mentor, or just looking for something because they heard of or they think are cool, or that's something that's going to actually propose their career, grow their career, for example.
So if I were to repeat back the question, how do you, if someone's asking for mentorship and maybe isn't ready to be mentored, how do you help or how do you encourage that? Is that what I'm getting at?
Yeah.
Hannah?
I kind of heard your question slightly differently, which is how do you help an employee begin to be receptive to feedback in the absence of a mentor that's helping them? Two words come to mind: psychological safety. Right? That has to be the necessary condition for them to be able to hear feedback. They're not feeling that safety, nothing is going to get through. So in some respects, I would start asking yourself, what's the environment that needs to be true for them to feel that way? Because so much about being vulnerable is to fear the implications of being vulnerable. Right? Stating a fear, I don't know how to do this. All right, well, when you say you don't know how to do it, and it's part of your job description, triggering a fear response pretty quickly, right? Unless you've created that environment where someone is feeling safe.
Last question?
So I think CSM job is one of the hardest job in any organization, and this hit me hard when earlier this week a CSM said he felt like the Joker movie, where the world is collapsing around him, right? The product is not working and all those challenges. So would you recommend
My products work.
So would you recommend that every CSM finds a mentor outside of their organization to handle these kind of situations?
That's a tough question. I mean, I've never been in a formal mentorship program. I've just sought out people that I felt would give me honest, candid feedback that I probably really needed to hear. And so, I don't know, at the moment you formalize anything, suddenly it changes the dynamics. And they may not necessarily understand the context. So I completely understand when I was working at JobBite, I felt for a long time the world was collapsing. I was their only CSM. So I completely understand that. And I think someone in the organization was super helpful and someone outside of the organization. I think it depends on the context, but it's good to have potentially both. You don't have to formalize it. The minute you say this is a requirement, I think you mentioned that earlier, the minute it's a requirement, it changes the dynamics and what people are willing to share.
Let's have a round of applause for our wonderful panel.